Let's talk a little bit about pandemic causes and effects and what's normal now in terms of career management. So no one expected back in March of 2020, at least in the tech world, that we would be 2.5 years in most areas working remotely from your house and through video chats and Slacks full time. I know I didn't. Even with things opening up more now in October of 22, many companies are still struggling with what it means to work mostly remote. And we're seeing a lot of tensions between employees who want to maybe work more from home and managers who want to work more in the office. And I think there's some cause and effects we can talk about as the dust starts settling. And we're still seeing these challenges of disconnects in how we want to get work done, how managers need to report work's getting done, what it means to manage our careers when, again, the ingrained expectations and behaviors of decades has been turned over like overnight on trying to do things like build relationships and trusts with peers, with managers, just across the board. And I think that unless we look at the impacts and what potential causes of those impacts are, and the tools that we've been ingrained to use, whether subconsciously or consciously, to manage those impacts, I think we're starting to see where the cracks are widening in expectations, both among individual contributors or employees and managers as well, and how we're all moving forward in the new world. I would say that in some cases, technically we've solved the engagement problem. I'm engaging with an audience now, or hopefully, and I engage with people every day on Zoom, and we Slack each other, we still write emails, and none of that's kind of changed. We were doing a lot of that stuff before the pandemic. But if I think about from an individual perspective as an employee, am I really as connected as I was in the prior pre-COVID world in terms of what I'll call the relationship side of work? And, I don't want to call it political. Politics are part of it, but it's really about we felt connected because of the tools we had. And I'm going to be the first to say, I'm going to talk about being in the office a lot. That's really meant as an example of a tool that we all had available to us that gave us certain things when it came to our relationships, that covered, probably subconsciously half the time, the need that we had to engage both personally and professionally. And I'll use a few examples here. Like, for example, you walk in and say, hey, as you're getting coffee, hey, how was the weekend? Did you get any work done? Or how was the football game? Or, hey, did you get any relaxing in? Did you go for that bike ride? That's one way we get engagement. We get to know people better. It's really more ad hoc. And the tool is you didn't have to do any extra effort. You were in the office, you'd see them, and the social norm at the time was that you would engage for a minute or two. And, that was kind of expected, and people did it. Some people might be a little down one day, but in general, that served a purpose. Likewise, as a manager, you had the ability to do flybys, and even during the little chat, you might have say, hey, by the way, I need that report by 4 o'clock today. You're going to be ready with that. And that literally took no effort because you could fly by, you walk in or getting coffee. And you didn't have to schedule a Zoom or hit them in Slack and hope they respond. And, well, they're showing online, but they're not answering. And I need this. And you don't want to call their cell phone because we don't really do that. We don't do that in the office. There are all these things which the norms have changed. And so when we look about the environment today, and we've seen some of the impacts, such as employee disengagement, quiet quitting, all the things we've been talking about, low morale. You have not just low morale, but you have teams not feeling that they're getting any cohesive teamwork together. And look at the tools that we've tried to use on that. I think we've all tried the virtual happy hours, the virtual coffee chats. We even have game night on Zoom, and we've tried all these different ways to build the new tools for how we engage in this post-pandemic world. Well, the technical tools are there, but how we use those tools to not regress that experience that we've had for decades in working together in the office. I think that at times even if we understood and we could see it, I don't think we're all there yet. And how do we keep that experience the same as we retrain ourselves, which took decades before, into this new norm? And people say, well, we're still getting productivity done, and companies are still, they're still being profitable, and yes, all that stuff is true. But we're also seeing higher attrition. We're seeing a higher level of burnout. We're having conversations about what it means to get over burnout, which I don't think we did as much before. I know I didn't have to talk to as many people about, well, what are you doing to get your burnout? Because we're always on, our offices for most of us are in the same place where we're living. And so again, the tools that we had to disengage, to have better work-life balance, to recharge ourselves, that has changed like quite a bit. And we talked a little bit about what it means to use these virtual tools, to have this engagement, but I don't think the tools have really addressed what I would call positive engagement model as equally as we had before, even if it was imperfect before. And again, I'm not saying that being in the office is the way to solve the problem, not at all. I think we're seeing in the, whatever you read online, that there's very different views about what it means to work remotely. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a slightly forward section coming up. But the important thing is that to recognize the tools that we were using don't necessarily work the same way. And if that's the case, then we have to continuously iterate these tools for the new norm of what it means to have engagement when you're connecting with your team or your manager, and whether that's for your career or just in general to say, hey, to feel connected as a human, to say, hey, how you doing? Because it's very easy today, I think we all recognize this, to come into your office where your computer is, and you turn it on, and you're looking at a stack of emails, but people aren't walking by your desk and giving that jolt of, hey, how was your weekend and how you doing? And you might ping them in Slack. I think there isn't as much of that goes on. But even the motions when you go through it is different. And I think that recognizing these as tools, and as managers in particular, we have to adjust our tools for the engagement with our employees, same way as individuals, which we'll talk about in a minute, need to change the way they engage the tools to talk with their managers. And I'll just give like a specific example with, say, junior managers. For decades, junior managers or new managers are they've seen that same ingrained behavior about how you manage a team, and you can be physically with them many times. And I know it's not the whole case, because like I myself work on a very remote team and have for many years, but that's not the bulk of the employees through this transition. So what does it mean to help a line manager understand some of these new tools? And I think that's an area where I know I'm highly passionate to move forward. Is line managers, they're just learning the basics of managing both the technical management skills of scoping and project management, as well as how do you build team cohesion in a world where even more senior managers are struggling with it and don't have all the tools because it's so brand new. So from a manager perspective, you have the bulk of your employees managed by first level managers who are probably struggling as much, if not more in many cases, in this whole new world. And how do we help them kind of build the skills and experience to be more effective in managing the relationships and the morale, as well as the business work that has to get done? So again, I think these are like, there's no solid answer yet, but recognizing that we have these gaps will help us collectively look at how do we build tools to get better in that space. And I also think it's important from an employee perspective to recognize that you're not going to have as many easy opportunities to ask for help. Like I would have a lot of employees, and I do this with my own manager, where I could swing by their office and I say, hey, you got 3 minutes? Like, I really just need to get this out. I have a question or a problem. That was easy to do, and most of the time, if they weren't on a call, they would take a few minutes. It could solve a problem pretty easy, right? You could help them out with a few quick words. Well, now you have to try to hit them up on Slack. Are they going to answer the Slack? They don't have to answer the Slack. Well, I need the answer now. I don't want to use a cell phone. Now it's considered rude. They might be in a meeting, even though they're not showing there. And do I wait for the Slack to answer? Do I send an email? And just the whole dynamic has changed about how you ask for help. And I think it will actually not encourage the ability to ask for help, because it's not the same immediacy. And that was a tool that we had when you're in the office. And even when I travel to the office, I have the tool of immediacy. If my manager's in the office when I happen to be there, and I can walk in and say, hey, I just need 2 minutes. And I don't have to try to schedule a meeting or try to interrupt them. And I think these are part of the tools that we talk about what it means as these norms change. And so I just went over a couple of examples, but if you look at dissecting, all the same impacts that we've seen in the past, whether it's the quiet quitting or the disengagement or the lack of morale or the feeling of hopelessness in your career, not that any of it has actually changed, but the tools that we have been so used to using to deal with it, I think might have changed quite a bit in some cases. And while we try to use them or we can't use them, we're still struggling with the muscle memory of what it means to develop these new tools. And I ask everyone is share the tools, like share the different things that you do in order to help really change how we're dealing with the new norm and the challenges that we're seeing today. And we'll talk a little bit more in the future segment about how do you then build some of the trust with your manager. But again, this is really about understanding that the cause and effects are different, and therefore the tools also need to change.